A chained Apache girl sold at a trading post, a rancher who refused to see her as property, and a bond so powerful it changed both their lives forever. This is the story of Naelli and Cole, one of pain, rescue, healing, and a love born from pure humanity. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And tell me, where are you watching from? Let's get started. Cole Maddox had walked into the trading post expecting nothing more than supplies and a quiet ride home. But the moment he stepped inside, something in the air felt wrong. The room buzzed with laughter, harsh, mocking, the kind of sound that had nothing to do with humor. Then he saw her, a young Apache girl, wrists and ankles clamped in iron, dust and dried blood streaking her skin, stood surrounded by traders who treated her like a spectacle. One of them jerked the chain at her wrists and shouted, "Take her, she bites!" That sent the room into another round of cruel laughter. But Cole didn't hear it the same way the others did. All he noticed was the way her shoulders trembled, not from cold, but from exhaustion so heavy it seemed carved into her bones. She didn't flinch at their jeers. She didn't lift her eyes either. It was as if she had learned that eye contact only brought more trouble. Cole had seen horses with that same look, animals, pushed past fear into something colder and deeper, resignation. She was young, maybe 17 or 18, but her expression carried decades of hardship. Cole couldn't imagine what she had endured on the journey here or before it, but he knew enough about men, like the ones holding her, to understand their cruelty. Didn't start at the trading post. The traders tried to goad her, tugging the chains to force some reaction. She barely swayed, whether because she refused or because she simply didn't have the strength anymore. Cole couldn't tell. When she finally lifted her face, he felt the breath leave his lungs. Her eyes weren't wild or angry the way the traders claimed. They were hollow, numb, as if the world had taken everything she had and then demanded more. Cole wasn't a man easily shaken, but something in him knotted at the sight. She wasn't dangerous, she was dying inside. "How much?" he heard himself ask, voice steady though his chest tightened. The traders blinked in surprise. "For her?" One scoffed. "Hell, Maddox, she ain't worth the trouble. But if you're itching for a challenge..." Cole's jaw tightened. They talked as if she were livestock, as if she had no ears, no heart left to wound. The girl looked between them with a stillness that felt like surrender. He didn't haggle. He didn't waste breath arguing. He paid the price they named, knowing it was 3 times too high, but not caring. The traders shrugged, satisfied, and washed their hands of her. The moment the chains were passed to him, Cole felt the weight of them, cold, heavy, cruel. The girl didn't move. She didn't even react. It was like she didn't believe anything would change. He knelt, slow and deliberate, unlocking the shackles from her wrists. Her skin was rubbed raw beneath the iron, welts and deep bruises showing through grime. Every mark on her seemed like a story of someone else's violence. She didn't pull away from him, but she didn't lean forward either. She stood as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to stand differently. When the last shackle fell, she swayed, legs trembling under her. Cole steadied her gently by the elbows. She tensed at his touch, but she didn't fight. Her breathing quickened, shallow and frantic, like she wasn't used to being touched without pain following. "You're free of them," he said quietly. He wasn't sure she understood English, but the tone might reach her even if the words didn't. She blinked slowly, as if trying to decide whether she believed him. Cole removed his coat without hesitation and draped it around her shoulders. The fabric was far too big, swallowing her small frame completely, but she clutched it instinctively, fingers trembling around the edges. The simple act of being covered, of not being exposed to leering eyes, seemed to confuse her. He guided her toward the door, slowly, careful not to startle her. Every sound in the trading post felt too sharp, boots scraping the floorboards, chuckles behind their backs, the snap of a crate being dropped on the counter. She flinched at each one, muscles jerking as if expecting a blow. Cole felt fury rise inside him, quiet but searing. People didn't learn to fear sounds like that unless they'd lived through them. Outside, the sunlight made her blink rapidly. Her face tightened, like the brightness pained her. Maybe she hadn't been outside without being shoved or dragged in a long time. Cole helped her to his horse, waiting for the panic he feared might come. But instead she stood perfectly still, too still, like a child trying not to be punished. When he offered his hand to help her climb, she stared at it for several seconds before placing her palm against his. Her hand was ice-cold, feather-light, but her grip trembled with the faintest spark of instinctive fear. Once she was settled on the horse, Cole climbed behind her, leaving enough distance not to crowd her, yet close enough to keep her steady if she wavered. She didn't look back at the trading post, didn't glance at the men who had laughed at her pain. She just stared ahead, as if too tired to think of anything but the next breath. The ride back to the ranch was long and quiet. She didn't speak once. At first Cole assumed she was afraid, but the longer he watched her, the more he saw something different. She was listening, to the wind, to the hoofbeats, to the silence between them, as if she were trying to understand whether this new world was safe. About halfway home she shivered violently despite the heavy coat around her. Cole didn't touch her, didn't pull her closer. He sensed that would only frighten her, but he adjusted the coat around her shoulders, making sure the wind couldn't cut through it. Her fingers gripped the fabric again, tighter this time, as if she'd only just realized warmth was something she was allowed to hold on to. When the ranch finally came into view, wide fields, fences running long and straight, a home that breathed quiet and steadiness, Cole glanced down at her. Her eyes lingered on the house, then the barn, then the distant cattle. She looked overwhelmed, as if she didn't know what such a place meant for someone like her. Cole didn't speak. Words felt too fragile, too easily misunderstood. Instead, he guided the horse toward the yard, dismounted first, and held out his hand again. This time, she hesitated for just a moment longer, but she took it, slowly, carefully, as though deciding to trust him, even in the smallest measure, required more courage than most people would ever understand. The sun dipped lower behind them, painting the sky with soft gold. The coat hung around her like a shield, her eyes flickering with confusion and exhaustion. But underneath all of that, there was the faintest spark of something else. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of it. Naelli's first nights at the ranch were restless ones. Even though the house was quiet and warm, she slept lightly, waking at every creak of the floorboards, every shift of wind outside the window. The memories of shackles and harsh voices shadowed her dreams, but each time she startled awake, she saw only Martha's gentle lamp outside the open door and heard only Cole's deep, steady footsteps somewhere down the hall. Neither of them pushed her to speak, to explain, or to be anything other than what she was in that fragile moment, a girl, learning how to breathe again. Martha tended her wounds each morning with warm water and soft hands that smelled of lavender and soap. She never asked how Naelli had been hurt. She would only murmur things like, "You're safe, sweetheart. No one's touching you wrong here." Naelli didn't answer, but a part of her softened every time those words were spoken. She had long forgotten the feeling of being cared for without hidden intentions. Even kindness had once been a trick in her world, something offered only to take something from her later. But here, nothing happened afterward. No ropes, no commands, no blows. Just warm soup, clean blankets, quiet rooms, and a gentle woman brushing knots from her hair. Cole kept his distance at first, not because he didn't care, but because he understood fear. He had seen animals spook from their own shadows after a beating. He imagined people were no different. Still, he made sure she knew where he was, never sneaking up, never appearing suddenly behind her. When he spoke, his voice was low and slow, like he wanted to give her time to adjust to each word. One afternoon, she stepped outside the house, barefoot in the tall grass, watching the horses in the corral with a mixture of longing and caution. When Cole approached, he stopped several feet away so she could see him coming. "You like horses?" he said gently. Her eyes flicked to him, surprised he'd noticed. After a long moment, she nodded once. It wasn't a big movement, but for her, that tiny gesture was an entire sentence. Cole didn't ask if she wanted to ride. Instead, he opened the gate and let one of the calmer mares wander toward her. When the horse reached out her muzzle, Naelli froze, unsure if she should touch it. But the mare nudged her gently, warm breath fogging the cool air. Slowly, Naelli lifted her hand and placed it on the mare's nose. Her fingers trembled, but the horse didn't shy away. Instead, she leaned in closer, as if recognizing something familiar, a shared kind of hurt, a shared kind of healing. Naelli's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears away quickly, as if fearing they might be misunderstood. Cole didn't move, didn't speak. He let her have her moment in silence. Weeks passed, and Naelli learned small things first. The sound of a clean kitchen, the weight of quiet afternoons, the touch of fabric that didn't scratch or bruise. She began helping Martha with laundry and herbs, her movements careful but eager to be useful. Martha would smile proudly at her, often praising her work with simple sentences meant to build confidence she wasn't used to having. But the first time Naelli laughed, a small, shy, fragile sound, it happened when Cole dropped a bucket of water on his own boots while trying to fix a pump. He looked so surprised, so utterly uncomposed, that Naelli couldn't hold back a tiny burst of laughter. She covered her mouth immediately, as if the sound itself might offend someone. Instead, Martha clapped a hand to her heart, and Cole broke into a grin so genuine it seemed to brighten the entire yard. "Glad to know I'm good for something," he chuckled. Naelli looked down, cheeks warm, but she didn't retreat into herself again. That moment, simple as it was, stitched a loose thread of trust between them. As the seasons shifted, Naelli's fear slowly lifted. Not all at once and not completely. Old wounds didn't simply disappear, but enough that she began to understand the rhythm of life at the ranch, the safety of its routine. She learned to ride the mare she had first touched, gently guiding the horse across the open fields. Cole rode beside her, but never too close, letting her set the pace. Sometimes she would catch him, watching her with an expression she didn't recognize at first, a mixture of admiration, worry, and something deeper that frightened her in a different way. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was unfamiliar. One evening, she found him on the porch, quietly repairing a bridle. She stood at the doorway, unsure if she was welcome to join him. He looked up, offered a soft smile, and nudged the empty chair beside him. "You don't owe us anything," he said in a steady voice when she finally sat. "Not work, not answers. You're not here because you have to be. You're here because I didn't want them hurting you anymore." Naelli lowered her gaze, trying to understand why anyone would care without expecting repayment. After a long moment, she whispered the first full sentence she had spoken in his presence. "People don't help for nothing." "Some do," he replied quietly. "You just haven't known them yet." Later that night she sat awake in her room, replaying his words. There had been no threat in them, no hidden meaning, just truth. A strange, warm truth. Months passed, and Naelli found herself gravitating toward Cole without meaning to. Not because she felt obligated, but because being near him didn't frighten her the way it once had. The tension she had always carried, waiting for harm, expecting disappointment, softened around him. One cold morning, snow dusted the fields. Cole was preparing to ride out to check fences when Naelli appeared beside the barn, bundled in one of Martha's thick coats. She held a pair of gloves out to him, ones Martha had sewn but hadn't finished. Naelli had stitched the last seams herself. "For you," she said softly. Cole stared at her, deeply moved by the simple gift. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet, almost hushed. Naelli hesitated, then added something she hadn't said before. "I stay because I want to." The words settled between them, warm despite the cold. That winter, the bond between them changed in small, subtle ways. More smiles, longer silences that didn't feel empty, soft conversations shared in the glow of lamplight. Cole's feelings deepened slowly, respectfully. Naelli's heart healed carefully, like a cracked branch, learning how to bloom again. The day she fully realized she trusted him came unexpectedly. She had woken from a nightmare, shaking and breathless. Instead of hiding in her room, she went to the porch, where Cole sat watching the stars. She stepped close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and whispered, "Stay, please." He didn't touch her, he didn't startle. He simply nodded and sat beside her until her trembling eased. When she leaned the slightest bit toward him, he let her, offering warmth without pressure. Life at the ranch continued, quiet, steady, healing, and eventually the understanding between them grew into something stronger than either had expected. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't demanded. It blossomed naturally, born from trust, gratitude, and the simple beauty of two wounded souls learning how to rebuild together. By spring, when Naelli walked beside Cole across the pasture, she no longer flinched when the wind carried loud sounds. She no longer looked over her shoulder for men who weren't there. And when Cole reached for her hand one afternoon, she didn't pull away. Her fingers slipped into his easily, as if they had always belonged there. In time, she became more than someone he had rescued. She became his partner, his equal, the quiet strength beside him. And he became more than her protector. He became the proof that gentleness could hold as much power as force, that compassion could build what cruelty had destroyed. They didn't speak vows in a church or make grand announcements. Their promises were built in everyday moments, in shared meals, laughter, quiet evenings, and soft touches exchanged in trust. Their love grew like the land around them, patiently, steadily, with roots that ran deep and strong. And Naelli, once a girl in chains, now stood upon her own ground, free not because someone unlocked her shackles, but because she finally believed she deserved a life beyond them. Together, Cole and Naelli built a home where fear had no place, where the past had no authority, and where healing became the greatest act of love either had ever known.